It is my pleasure to announce the next speaker who's going to represent he already represents an organization that's at the heart of this global movement all around a net zero climate resistant future. And the organization's climate and nature experts have been working with partners and governments throughout the year to advocate a more ambitious climate action. So before he comes on stage, I'd like to give him a little introduction. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Nicholas Lowe's, who's coming up. He's the head of sustainable business practices at the World Wildlife Fund. So he's coming from France along one of his colleagues that he works with, Mr. Maxime Prunier, and he's the CEO office of Atos. Well, Nicholas Lowe's has been joined at the WWF in France in 2014 to develop and manage high-level corporate partnerships. Clearly, he's here because Atos has created that partnership that's going to go global. And as well as a pilot collective actions to really influence the work in companies to transition their business models towards alignment and planetary boundaries, he's going to talk about a little bit more that they're up to. So the focus is really set on the most pressing environmental challenges of our time, and like commodity-based deforestation, overfishing, and setting the science-based targets for climate are developing operational biodiversity strategies. Mr. Lowe's had previously from 2008 to 2013, he worked as a consultant for PwC. So sustainable business services is his forte, and conducting advisory projects at strategic and operational levels, as well as an environmental and social audit for both public and private sector in only 20 countries. So let's give him a round of applause. Let's bring him up to the stage, talk about Atos and the partnership with WWF, Mr. Nicholas Lowe's, with his colleague, Mr. Maxime Prunier.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, very happy to be here with you at this COP28. Trying to address one of the most pressing crises of our time, climate change. And as was clearly explained by Nourdine Bihman in the opening speech, this crisis is connected to other ones, among which is the biodiversity crisis. It was recalled the figure of 69% of biodiversity loss in the past 50 years. 69%, what does it mean? 69% of the loss of species, it means really 69% less animals in the past 50 years. And while today climate change is the third main causes of biodiversity extinction, it will become the first dominant cause in the coming decades if we are not to change the trajectory of CO2 emissions. So, at WWF, we are an NGO, we are a global organization present in 100 countries, and we have chosen to be science-based, pragmatic, solution-oriented, and to select the right partners to work with in order to reach our conservation results, in order to be able to have an impact, to advance what matters, as was said by Nourdine Bihman. And so this is why we are proud and we are very happy to be able to work with committed companies like Atos, with whom we can both have broader impact than what we would be able to achieve by working alone on our side. So this is what we will present you with Maxime, the spirit of the partnership, the way we work together, and this is a path on which we invite you all to work with us, because this is really by working together that we can have a broader impact.
Yeah, thank you, Nicolas. So just to give you a little view on why we signed this partnership. So last November 17th in Paris, we had the press announcement with the CEO of WWF France, Mrs. Véronique Andrieux, and Nourdine Bihman, and that was indeed the end of a 12 months work in the shadow. We've been working very hard with WWF to shape this partnership. So what is basically the mission of WWF as a global organization? It's basically to conserve nature and reduce the most pressing threats to the diversity of life on Earth. And I think that, Nicolas, you perfectly put into perspective the fact that biodiversity is also part of the same issue as decarbonization. You cannot solve one of the two issues if you're not addressing the other. And on our side, as a global company, a global IT company, we are creating the foundations for a thriving tomorrow. So I believe in the opening speech of Nordin Biman, we wanted to align with a partner with whom we had the same values, right? So we wanted to put our digital expertise, and I think in a second, Mr. Andy Wallace will present you all the tech projects we have been working on with different WWF offices across the world. And of course, our 49,000, 52,000 Atosians, members of tech foundations, will be deeply involved in this partnership because we are launching one of the most ambitious volunteering time of program in the history of the company. So lots of exciting things ahead. Yeah.
So we have built a partnership on 4 axes. The first one is very important because in order to be credible and to have the ability to engage more companies in a decarbonization pathway, we at WWF, we have been at the forefront to create the Science-Based Target Initiative. It was created and launched at the COP21 as also a policy tool in order to show that the companies committed themselves and that it would help the negotiators of the COP21 to take the right level of ambition, if I may say. And given Atos has joined this initiative, has committed to the 1.5 pathway, and has made decarbonization part of its strategy, we really consider that by working together, we have this legitimacy and this credibility to be able to engage and convince more companies to join this movement. So this is an axis I will develop just after. The second axis is what was presented and what will be presented in detail by Andy just after, is how we harness the technology, the skills of Atosians in order to help us as conservationists to be more efficient, to have a broader impact, to be able to scale up and quicker also our conservation project in the critical, most important biodiversity areas in the world. Then we also are convinced that in order to be able to reach our impact more quickly, we need everybody to be on board. So this is why we have a dedicated actions to be able to have the employees come together, share their experience, be able to propose solutions, because we are more intelligent when we are more. So this is a key part of our partnership too. And then it's also important to note that, like was also recalled in the opening speech, it's key and critical, and this is our main ask for companies to reduce their carbon emission, because we cannot meet the net zero target if the companies do not abate 90%, 90, of their CO2 emissions. But in the meantime, it's also important to invest directly in the preservation and the restoration of the ecosystems. And this is what Atos is also doing with us by supporting and financing key conservation projects, both on land and in the Mediterranean Sea. So we have decided to, in order to engage companies on this decarbonization pathway, we have decided to launch a series of reports starting with the shipping industry. So shipping industry, it's kind of the backbone of the global economy. Everywhere in the world, every good we consume almost has been on a ship. We cannot be able to reach the global decarbonization without addressing this sector. And while right now, most of the R&D efforts are oriented towards new fuels, which will deliver actually results, but in the medium to long run, we are talking here about 20 to 30 years. We have tried with Atos to be able to look at what could deliver results in the short term in order to be able to activate and accelerate the decarbonization pathway of this industry. And this is why the first report we have done together and launched this year is on this industry. So there is a short video that explains the spirit.
The maritime shipping sector faces the challenges of decarbonization and digitalization. In today's interconnected world, the maritime transportation of goods is one of the largest economic sectors, backbone of the global economy, and with an urgent need to decarbonize. Although one of the least carbon-intensive mode of transport, this sector generates around 3% of the world total emissions, and this figure is expected to increase greatly by 2050 in a business-as-usual scenario. Industry players must commit to ambitious objectives. Long-term sustainable levers can be put in place, such as biofuels and better ship design. But operational levers are recommended for short and medium-term target achievement by 2030. And this is why Atos and the Worldwide Fund for Nature joined forces to support decarbonization in the maritime freight sector in terms of sobriety, energy efficiency, and operational optimization of decarbonization levers. 3 operational levers domains studied in particular are routing operations, onboard energy consumption, and terminal operations. These operational levers make it possible to obtain rapid and substantial reductions in CO2 emissions and to stay on course to limit global warming to 1.5 Celsius degrees. These 3 operational levers domains have a decarbonization potential of around 30% in the short-medium term. A range of strategies can be adopted, from optimizing the loading and unloading of goods to implementing more efficient routes and just-in-time arrival. As a dynamic response, vessel speed can be optimized for arrival at the port when services are available. These changes are made today and can have a significant impact on CO2 emissions reductions tomorrow. How to implement these solutions effectively? By adopting intelligent digital technologies. Drawing on our digital expertise, we explored the potential of cutting-edge technologies and data management. These technologies enable the maritime industry to make data-driven decisions, automate processes, and leverage data for unparalleled insights. For instance, the speed efficiency via just-in-time operational methods can unlock around 20% CO2 emissions reduction while improving the voyage result of about 14.4%. Let's act by reducing the scale of greenhouse gas emissions to respond to the climate challenge, here and now.
So this provides you with the summary, a very high-level summary of the content of the report, but it provides you with the spirit of what we are trying to do together. And so then what we want to do is to really able to meet and engage directly with the players, the direct players of this industry, in order to really engage them, to show them that there are short-term solutions that they can activate directly to help them on their decarbonization pathway. So this is really an important message for me to share with you, is like, whatever your industry, whatever your sector, whatever your position in the supply chain, everyone has a role to play. And so we really engage you to bring your ecosystem in this science-based target initiative, to align your targets on the 1.5 trajectory, to use your influence in order to positively influence the negotiation at the COP, and to be able to stay as much as we can on this 1.5 trajectory. This is true for climate. This is also true for nature. We are right now developing science-based target for nature, which will also help you, companies, industries, cities, investors, to be able to have very concrete and operational targets for your company, your institution on nature. So we are working on that. We cannot do it alone. So we engage you to come with us, to help us to drive change and have a positive impact. Thank you.
And now I'm very excited to call on stage Mr. Andy Wallace. Andy, you've been working very hard with your teams to provide technology solutions to WWF, so the floor is yours. Yeah.
Thank you. Nicolas and Max. And I'm going to talk about 3 of those projects that Nourdine mentioned in the introduction, about how we see biodiversity and decarbonization going hand in hand. So the first of our projects, working with colleagues from WWF, is how we're bringing artificial intelligence to the processing of satellite imaging and geospatial processing to support the surveillance of monitoring for biodiversity. So this is a project we're working with WWF globally. I think it is no surprise to anybody in this room to understand the importance of forest ecosystems in providing the oxygen that animals breathe. I think it is no surprise, especially in a place like Dubai, to understand that the oceans can help us to stabilize the world's climate and provide incredibly important services to people who live in coastal communities. One of the things that may be talked about a little less is how healthy savanna and grasslands are enormous carbon sinks, capturing carbon in very deep soils and providing a great reservoir of genetic diversity, which will be so important for the preservation of biodiversity on the planet. And so we have been working with a consortium of some incredible conservation organizations under the partnership of the Key Biodiversity Areas Alliance with WWF and also lots of support from BirdLife International. And we've set ourselves this exam question: how might we develop a solution using automation and artificial intelligence and satellite image processing to try to help those conservation organizations find early warning of potentially negative changes in those really, really important ecosystems. And we've chosen for our pilot East Africa, the Kenya-Tanzania border area, because we had to start somewhere. So we looked at we are currently looking at around about 30,000 square kilometers of this area. But to just bring this to life, again, I said I'd talk about one of 3 projects, but I'm going to home in on one of those 3 areas where we're currently running our pilot. This is the Amboseli National Park on the Kenya-Tanzania border, and we're working with some amazing colleagues in satellite processing. That's actually a Google image, but we're working with Planet.com, who are providing us high-resolution satellite imagery through partnership with WWF and the Key Biodiversities area. And what we're doing with our algorithms is beginning to try and home in on some of those areas where we can see structure, which may be in areas where it's perfectly well allowed to be, or maybe in areas where we wouldn't want to see those structure. This one is actually probably not doing any harm at all. So we have processed around about 4,000 satellite images to train our algorithm, which is beginning to be able to find structure using image classification and segmentation and object classification algorithms. And this is real data you're seeing on a slightly mocked up image that makes it easier because, of course, talking to people in public about algorithms, we sometimes lack a little in visual aids. But what we're being able to predict is to be able to see buildings with an accuracy of 95 to 98% accuracy. Bomas, which is a Swahili word for the cattle enclosures or enclosures for livestock to keep them overnight. And particularly fencing, which can be a very problematic area in some of the conservation areas. So we're starting to process satellite imagery. But of course, some of these things have been done for many years. And so we're writing a series of algorithms. We're looking, in this case, this is the same area of East Africa. We're looking at the comparison between red and green and infrared light. And what we can then begin to do, pixel by pixel through those 30,000 square kilometers, is begin to understand the ratio of reflectance, which helps us understand the quality of that grassland. Having said that it's really difficult to illustrate an algorithm in a public place such as this, we've thrown a little animation together that will just try and bring that to life. So our colleagues at Planet.com have really helped us with satellite imagery month on month going back till about 2018, which can help us to understand the mean and standard deviation of some of those values that we might want to expect. And of course, in a natural ecosystem, one would expect to see a certain amount of variance. And of course, we're talking about the East Africa, but these are transportable technologies. This is something that we will grow and scale and build on and could work in other parts of the world. So as we go through this animation, what we'll see is that the data points year on year, this again is test data, so it's done to illustrate, they might have a natural variation. And many of you who work in IT will be very familiar with the concept of sort of anomaly detection and predictive maintenance, which are services I'm sure a lot of you will talk to Atos or our partners about. But by applying that thinking to some of these ecological data points, we can begin to understand. If, for example, we might see unusual greenness in an area at a particular time of year, that might indicate an unusual climatic pattern. If we might see a drop-off in that, we could be looking at overgrazing or fire or drought or something else. So if we know where this is happening at a point in space and time, and if we're able to predict forward, then we can begin to try to offer advice and data to conservation organizations, to local communities, to people on the ground who can then understand and slice and dice and filter that data and begin to see how that varies over time. And so we are building a digital platform to host those three algorithms, to bring that together, and then begin to create a scalable user interface which can hold that digital data and then present that to people who will use it. And the benefit for our pilot program will be for government, regional or local government, or NGOs, or local communities, or scientific organizations, in this case in East Africa, not just in Kenya, but we are working actively with other conservation organizations to scale this. But of course, these grassland areas can apply in other continents. And we're not just focusing on savanna and grassland because this is a scalable technology. So I'll just come on to the second project, which we are building into the same digital platform. We're going to jump to a different part of the world now, where we're going to look at zoonotic diseases. And for some of you who, not everybody in a room like this will be familiar with the word, but we're talking about those diseases which can jump from animal to animal, from animal to human, or from humans back to animals. Many of those will be very, very well known to us, SARS or MERS or Ebola, or of course COVID-19 that we all heard plenty too much about. And so in this case, again, working on the same platform, using many of the same types of algorithm, though not in this case starting with satellite imagery, the exam question we've set ourselves is to create a machine learning algorithm that can help us to understand the geographical hotspots where all of the factors which are known to influence the emergence of new diseases, the spillover of those disease types into new different animals or different communities. And we're working with the WWF Counter Illegal Wildlife Trade Hub in Hong Kong, with the World Organization for Animal Health, the World Resources Institute, who are providing us enormous information on grassland cover and deforestation alerts, and of course universities both in Asia and in Europe. I mentioned it was a different area. We are looking into the Mekong Basin area, where we have started to gather geographic and demographic and infrastructure data around such points as special economic zones emerging in the borders between Thailand and Laos and Vietnam, Myanmar, and some of those other countries in the region, in order to start trying to find the influence that those demographic and infrastructure changes might have on the emergence of, on the change of habitat and the emergence of new disease. And in our initial pilot work, we've run this model for the last 8 years of data from the World Organization for Animal Health. Completely unreadable on this slide, of course, there are about 15 diseases that we've modeled, and we're beginning to get some very, very promising results in the prediction of locations where the factors come together for the emergence of bird flu, for swine flu, and for the rather horribly named lumpy skin disease, which influences cattle and buffaloes in the area. And as we develop our thinking, we will not only expand that capability to look into other disease types from the World Organization for Animal Health, which are so influential on livestock, but also wildlife diseases, which are closely associated with deforestation and habitat destruction in areas which are better preserved. And we're trying to do that in a way that gives us a pipeline to add new data. So if we're bringing in deforestation alerts and wildlife data, for example, we've got projects coming down the line where we might want to read in genetic data and other data. As we take that kind of predictive capability to new areas, if we were working in this area, in this region, for instance, we would be working with local professionals to try and understand the factors which are important in those new ecosystems, those new habitats, so that we can extend those algorithms and build on that platform. And I hope everybody would find this a very intuitive thing to understand, but the ability to predict a location where disease might occur rather than react after it has done can be immeasurably helpful both for people and for the cost and convenience of those trying to actually deal with these disease emergence and spillover events. I mentioned that we were working on 3 different project areas. We are also working with WWF colleagues and around a tool called SMART, the Spatial Monitoring and Reporting Tool, actually developed not by ourselves, but by North Carolina Zoo with Wildlife Conservation Society and already a large group of collaborative organizations. And we're doing 3 sets of things with that community. It's a widely used tool. It's used in nearly 100 countries by 50,000 users. There's 1,000 implementations of this tool, and it's complicated to implement. So people potentially in rather remote areas, often with very poor technology and sometimes not a great deal of electricity, need to go through a relatively complex installation process. So the first thing we've done is put a wrapper around that to try and take a multi-step deployment process, which has got a level of complexity in it, and make that a much simpler thing for people to do, even if they don't really have an IT background. So this is an example where we're maybe really trying to support WWF and their colleagues around directly providing technical services onto some work that they're actively in the middle of. Another thing we're doing with the SMART tool is in the area of human-wildlife conflict. And again, anybody in the room could probably take some spreadsheets and make some fancy graphics on that. But when we begin to provide tools that help to manage human-wildlife conflict at a governmental level, at the scientific level, and at the community level, we can start to really make a difference, not just in terms of putting fancy graphs instead of a spreadsheet onto a smart device, but actually if farmers in Bhutan are losing land to wild pigs, or if conservationists in Malawi are trying to protect local communities from carnivores escaping from parks, then these sorts of tools in the hands of the people who can really use them will make an enormous difference. And so those are just some examples of the work that we're doing, building upon what Nordine was saying about the way we see biodiversity is going hand in hand with decarbonization to try and support the work that we need to do for a better planet. We're also going to be bringing our Atos people in a series of hackathons to try and come up with better visualizations, because these systems have got mountains of data that aren't being well used. And in the future, we've got a roadmap of intuitive design, increasing the visual appeal, increasing the accessibility for different types of users from different types of backgrounds, building in educational resources. And so hopefully what you can see, just as a tiny flavor in 15 minutes, is an example of some of those projects that Nordine was talking about that we want to deliver with WWF alongside the decarbonization agenda, so that as well as delivering sustainable IT, we're also using that IT to add to the sustainability and biodiversity management agenda. And on that note, am I handing back to you to talk about the next steps, Max?
Yeah. Very quickly, as a conclusion, our friends on WWF had to come back to the green zone, but just wanted to share with you that indeed this conversation with WWF started 2 years ago at COP26. So probably you may have the opportunity to develop the same kind of partnership, and we hope that it was inspirational for your own business to start maybe something with them, or to work with us to improve the tools that we've been presenting to you. So without further ado, I think, yeah, we can move to the next part of the event.